I understand that he's not ready. We'll be getting to him in a few minutes. All right, so Duncan, just listening to what PLO Lumumba has to say, really, I mean, some of the things that he said, really, you have to break it down for normal Kenyans like us to really understand. But he says that what NASA has presented is quote-unquote petty grievances that can really not be used to nullify an election. And that was really the argument by, all the lawyers representing IEBC yesterday. What do you make of, the arguments that were also brought forward by IEBC?
The arguments generally brought forward by IEBC was to try and counter the averments and allegations by NASA. And they did quite a good job in trying to counter that, even though it was also clear that there were areas where there were difficulties which they agreed. It was also clear from their version that there are also areas which, if you look at the petition itself, there may be some areas where they had enough rebuttals from their end. But more importantly is that generally, if you look at it, the issue boils down to Section 38, whereby the burden of proof and the nature of irregularities, because the law says that you may have irregularities, but they may not be substantial enough to actually nullify an election. But we also have this particular article, which also says that if the elections are not held substantially in accordance to the laid down rules, regulations, then by that particular version alone, it is enough to nullify. But the confusion abounds because of the decision in 2013, which actually said you must actually look at it in a conjoined manner and not as disjoint manner.
What does that mean?
It means that you must demonstrate both that something was wrong in terms of how the elections were conducted, and you must also give the nexus to the effect of that particular wrong in terms of limiting your votes.
Yes.
To such a point that analysts say that it's like you have to demonstrate that without this anomaly, I would have won. But if you look at our law, and the issue came up when we actually took this word for word from the British version of their law, which British version has an and. It actually means you read them together. But if you look at our laws, we actually put an or. So if you read it strictly, it may actually give you an impression that you can demonstrate one and not demonstrate the other. But the Supreme Court ruling actually took the and position. So that's why if you look at the arguments by IEBC, and I believe even the arguments that we may get today from the third respondent, they will most likely lean towards the position that the Supreme Court took in 2013 and want to level it down there. And that's why you had most of the IEBC lawyers trying to say, yes, there may be something here which is not right, but it is not substantial enough and it did not affect the votes enough. And that is what they are trying to demonstrate. But NASA on this end has actually taken the other side and said that the issue of affecting is another issue, because what we can demonstrate is that things were not done. There were anomalies, there were defects. But on this other side, they also come and caution themselves and say that in any case, even we cannot be able to say whether it affected or not, because they are saying this particular process is, and you cannot verify it. It is such a sham that you cannot even verify from this end whether even we should go for a runoff. And once they cloud it, they try to also look at the other side, where even if the court agrees with the 2013, the court may actually is being told that you cannot even verify whether the effect of these anomalies to the main results.
All right, Murigi, she's broken it down so well. So what can you really say? Because there's really that issue, and even you heard PLO Lumumba saying there, if it's not about numbers, what is it, about? But just looking at, the arguments brought in by NASA about was the election constitutional, did it follow the law? Are we likely to see that having a big impact on the kind of decision that ultimately will be made?
Yesterday I had a discussion with a colleague, and we were trying to ask ourselves this question, whether there's a distinction between a constitutional petition and an election petition. Because essentially what you have before us, and I do not want to talk in terms of the merit of the petition and the basis of which, is that it challenges the constitutionality of the process itself, the way it was done, because it is qualitative. You need to look at the quality of the process itself. It's not just quantitative in terms of the numbers that are generated from the process. And that's the reason why you see they depart. that on one part, NASA heavily relies on the Constitution and says that if the Constitution is not followed, then the entire process, regardless of what numbers emerge from it,
it's flawed.
Yeah, it's flawed. But here you have IEBC saying, listen, we have a situation where you have insignificant, and I believe looking at what, for example, the responses that you got from Issa Mansour, from Karori, all of them, and even Paul Mito, what we're saying, they actually used to call them administrative errors.
Okay.
So those errors, they're saying, they're not so substantial as to have affected the outcome of that result. And actually, that is the crux of their response, that we have responded to all these issues that have been raised, all these other issues of law that have been raised, but at the end of the day, these, if you look at the numbers, for them the key is, if you look at the numbers, we did substantially well, but if you look at the numbers, whatever complaints they are there, they do not affect the result.
We have to wrap up. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have to wrap up. Thank you for your insights. We wait to see the case that Uhuru Kenyatta's team is going to put in today. Well, I've been speaking to Duncan Okach and Murigi Kamane, both are lawyers, just helping us to understand really the processes that have been happening so far.